Alex's morning began normally enough. Light poured in through the window, birds sang, and the gentle buzz of the city could be heard outside. However, a chilling sense of foreboding came over them when Alex roused from slumber and grabbed for the alarm clock. Hour on the clock said 6 a.m., the same hour Alex had seen the day before. As they began to grasp the gravity of the situation, confusion gave way to incredulity. Everything that happened that day was already ingrained in their minds. They were terrified but hoped against hope that it was merely an odd case of déjà vu, so they hurried through their usual morning ritual. The pattern persisted, though. They get up and have the same breakfast and drive to work every day. It seemed as if Alex were stuck in an endless loop, and time had stopped. A terrifying prophecy was the first indication of genuine terror. A worried co-worker walked up to Alex as he entered the office building where they both worked. A co-worker continued, "Alex, I had the strangest dream last night. The awful accident you were in was witnessed by me. It was so real that I still can't shake the fear that something terrible is about to occur." Alex's heart sank with panic as they tried to write off the warning as coincidental. The feeling of impending doom only grew stronger as the day progressed. Alex debated whether or not to cross the street to their usual cafe when lunchtime arrived. The blaring of automobile horns echoed across the busy metropolis as a cold breeze blew through. A fast automobile careened towards them as they crossed the street, its driver oblivious to the approaching disaster. Alex's pulse raced as they stumbled to the sidewalk in disbelief after nearly avoiding a collision. The warning from their co-worker reverberated in their head, and they knew with terrible certainty that they were stuck in a time loop that would cause them to repeat the same day over and over again until they met a horrific end. They remained in their flat for the following cycle, refusing to leave, but the loop continued as before, with each day delivering a fresh and horrible death. Every day ended in a horrible death, whether it was from a tumble down the stairs, an explosion from a gas leak, or a weird accident at the gym. Alex's sanity gradually deteriorated with each cycle. They were on the verge of insanity due to their persistent worry about dying, helplessness to break free of the cycle, and unsettling feelings of déjà vu. It was impossible to keep reliving their deaths again and over. Alex's grim resolve grew as the cycle went on and on. They had to figure out what was causing this nightmare, or they would lose their minds and maybe their lives forever. Alex had lost track of time as each day became one continuous cycle of terror and death. Time kept repeating itself, and each new cycle brought a more horrible manner for them to die. They needed information if they were ever going to unravel the mysteries of this nightmare. Alex, intent on finding out the truth, started looking for hints within the limitations of their repeating day. They looked all throughout their apartment for signs of something unusual, but everything seemed normal except that the day kept repeating itself. They were so desperate that they finally told their roommate Sarah about the terrifying time loop. Despite her initial skepticism, Sarah eventually came to accept the cycle as inevitable. Alex's terrified expression proved beyond a reasonable doubt that evil was afoot. They discussed potential causes and solutions jointly. Maybe it was a botched experiment, a curse from the afterlife, or something from outer space. The options were limitless, but the solutions eluded them. They decided to focus their inquiry on Alex's place of employment. They reasoned that the time loop had to be related to their work in some way, so they began scrutinizing every aspect of their workplace for clues. But day after day, no obvious explanation for their plight emerged. Alex had received an anonymous communication during this time of extreme need. The email included no sender information and only one sentence: "Find the watch." The note contained a ray of optimism. It was information that may help them in their search for solutions. Alex and Sarah started searching their flat frantically and ended up flipping everything upside down. An ornately engraved ancient pocket watch was eventually discovered concealed under a stack of old magazines in a dark cupboard. It was an heirloom timepiece, the type that is passed down from generation to generation. The watch made a rhythmic alien sound as they studied it. Alex had a strange feeling that the watch was the answer to their problem. As if it were waiting for them to find it, it was the sole strange thing in their flat. Now that Alex and Sarah had the watch, they could narrow their search for answers. They had believed that by discovering the mechanism behind the time loop, they might be able to escape its suffocating hold. The loop of time kept repeating, but Alex's resolve only got stronger every time. They were prepared to face the powers that had trapped them in this endless nightmare, with the help of the mystery watch and a desperate yearning for answers. Exploration of the mysterious time loop was just getting started. Alex and Sarah were desperate to figure out what mysteries the intriguing antique pocket watch held as they spent more and more time in the time loop. It was the only piece of information they had, a mysterious email that had materialized out of nowhere. The watch appeared to have a magical quality, what with all its exquisite carvings and steady ticking. It was obviously an antique and out of place in today's society. Nonetheless, it had become a symbol of hope for Alex and Sarah, a possible means to ending the recurrence of their deaths. They consulted horologists and paranormal researchers in an effort to figure out the watch's mystery. The carvings on the watch were riddled with mysterious symbols and sigils that hinted to its esoteric origins. A disturbing revelation was made to them one evening while consulting a well-known specialist on ancient relics. The ancient ritual associated with the watch's engravings involved the manipulation of time and the prolonging of one's life. A mysterious group of magicians who explored uncharted territories were rumored to have practiced it. The expert cautioned that Alex's watch may be a portal to the same evil that trapped him in the time warp. It was a key to freedom, but also a jail, a prison that held the power of time. Alex and Sarah were so determined to get away from the watch that they decided to attack it head-on. They started playing around with it, hoping to discover its latent potential. They felt it and saw fragments of their past that looked unconnected but were actually interwoven when they touched it. The watch was revealed to be the loop's catalyst, a relic that gave them access to and control over time itself. The thing was, nobody knew what it was for. They looked at the watch for a while and then saw an old journal in their flat, which none of them could have sworn they had ever had. The item belonged to a scientist who had previously occupied the flat. The diary's obtuse entries discussed time travel research and the development of a gadget called the Chrono Medallion. The journal included cryptic references to a possible link between the watch and the Chrono Medallion, a device with the ability to manipulate time. The last occupant seems to have been on a mission identical to their own, looking for a way out of the time loop. With this new information in hand, Alex and Sarah set out to locate the Chrono Medallion in the hopes that it would unlock the door to freedom. The diary led them to a secret laboratory buried under the city, where everything appeared to be frozen in time. The gravity of their task became increasingly apparent as they progressed farther into the underground maze. The continual cycle of death in the time loop has left them emotionally traumatized. Now that they possessed the watch and were closing in on the enigmatic Chrono Medallion, Alex and Sarah were prepared to face the powers that had trapped them in this nightmare. They were going to find out where the time loop came from and with any luck figure out how to get out of it for good. The long-abandoned facility underneath the city was a time capsule full of ancient artifacts and failed experiments. Alex and Sarah felt the weight of history on their shoulders as they explored further into the underground maze, as if the very walls of the institution contained the ghosts of many experiments gone wrong. The diary's hints led them to this secret chamber, where they hoped to find the Chrono Medallion. It was an incalculably potent item, capable of altering the flow of time itself. They might be able to escape the time loop that had trapped them if they learned to use its powers. Their lengthy and dangerous journey through the laboratory's maze. The machines and tools had aged poorly, and some of them had taken on a frightening, almost organic appearance. Darkness coiled about them like a serpent as cables and wires pulsed and mysterious equipment watched their every move. After what seemed like hours, they entered a chamber near the facility's core. The Chrono Medallion, an exotic item wrapped with elaborate markings and adorned with odd gemstones, stood on a pedestal in the room's center. A terrifying understanding came over them as they got closer to the medallion. They did not have the chamber to themselves. From the darkness stepped a person dressed in lab clothes that had seen better days. They had encountered the spectral form of the scientist whose journal they had found. The specter's voice echoed across the ages as he related the tale of his failed attempts to control time and the development of the Chrono Medallion. Along with Alex and Sarah, he had become stuck in the time loop and hoped to use the medallion's ability to break free. The time loop that trapped them all was the product of his research, which tragically backfired and led to his own death. It seems like the medallion held both the means to escape and the portent of impending disaster. Alex and Sarah's desperation compelled them to try to exploit the Chrono Medallion's power to liberate themselves from the time loop. They felt a burst of electricity as their fingers touched the ancient item, a link to the very essence of time. However, the medallion has a mind of its own. It defied their efforts to tame it, and time itself appeared to crack and distort all around them. A temporal vortex engulfed them, and they were forced to relive parts of their own lives while also watching the innumerable deaths that had happened throughout the time loop. Alex and Sarah saw a terrifying sight of the reality among the mayhem. The time loop was a self-perpetuating cycle, a curse that thrived on their own attempts to break free. As they fought, its hold on them only tightened. They made a last-ditch effort to break the pattern by resorting to drastic measures. The Chrono Medallion was broken with a final group effort, its power vanishing like that of a blown bubble. There was a shudder in the lab, and the scientist's spirit disappeared. Alex and Sarah returned to their flat as the temporal disruption faded. The time warp was finally over. The Chrono Medallion, the source of their misery, was gone, and while the relief was immense, they realized the price they had paid. After all they went through, they swore they would stop tampering with the past. They had seen a glimpse of the destructive potential of messing with time. Their lives eventually went back to normal, but they were constantly plagued by flashbacks of the time loop. They had survived the never-ending death cycle, although with scars. They would never forget the sobering message the time loop left them with about the perils of tampering with forces beyond human understanding, the mysteries of time.